Recently, I needed a bit of footage of Cyprus Station for a video, and I thought, while I'm here, why not get enough to do a full video about Cyprus? So I did, and here we are, in Cyprus. Now, if you don't know London, you might be a bit confused as to why I keep going on about Cyprus when I'm clearly in London. Cyprus is a place in London's Docklands, way out east on the Docklands Light Railway, near to Beckton. As to how it came to get that name, well, therein lies a tale, and you're going to have to bear with me because it starts a long way from here. The Ottoman Empire had once been an immense power stretching across North Africa, West Asia, and Southeast Europe. But by the 1870s it was firmly in decline. New industrialized powers were emerging, so too were nationalist movements within. It would gain the nickname of the sick man of Europe. While the Ottoman Empire shrank back, the Russian Empire started moving in. So the Ottoman Empire struck back, by making a deal with Britain. In exchange for protection against Russia, Britain could have Cyprus as a protectorate. The island was handed over in 1878. I don't know what they thought about this in East London, if anything, but in the docks they had concerns of their own. A new dock was being built, the magnificent Royal Albert Dock. This covered an area of 85 acres and could boast 3 miles of quays. This was designed to handle the very largest ships of all, not only cargo ships, but the ocean liners that were coming into their own. The docks would be provided with all the necessary facilities, including their own railway line. The railway operated a local service from Custom House to Galleons, what was known as the Galleons branch. But as I say, the docks were enormous. Not only that, but there were other major industries in the area, such as the Beckton Gasworks. So it was decided to build an estate for the workforce, a self-contained workers' town. This was completed in 1881, a year after the opening of the Royal Albert Dock. And in the spirit of patriotism, they named the new estate after Cyprus. Now, I'm going to level with you folks here. I've had terrible difficulty finding anything about Cyprus out at all. I have several books on the history of the Docklands, and none of them even mention the Cyprus estate. The information I've been able to find has been contradictory. For instance, one source states that the town was built here on land owned by the Port of London Authority. Another states that it was built here because it was the only land around here not owned by the Port of London Authority. And both sources are wrong, because the Port of London Authority didn't even exist until 1909. The company that built the dock was the London and St. Catherine Dock Company. What we can say is that the land was far from ideal for building on, being very marshy. None of the buildings were particularly high quality to begin with. Some council houses were added before the First World War, and during this conflict, munitions factories were set up nearby. But the place was not what you might call attractive, and even an estate agent would struggle to find nice things to say about Cyprus. Being a long way from the city, many rather unpleasant industries had moved in, of which munitions were just one. The industries of Cyprus would bring its downfall. Well, it didn't have very far to fall from, but you know what I mean. The docks and their railways were essential to the British war effort, so it's no surprise that the area was a target for the Luftwaffe. Air raids would destroy much of the housing in the area, as well as knocking the railway out in 1940. The railway had been declining in popularity ever since the beginning of the century, so the London and North Eastern Railway, who operated it, decided to call it a day, for passenger services at least. Temporary prefab houses were put up to replace many of those destroyed. The only Victorian building that survives today is this one, the Ferndale Public House. This was turned into flats in 2009, originally on the condition that the original building would be sympathetically preserved. But the developers did that thing that developers sometimes do, where they ignore the conditions and then act all innocent, like somehow neither they, nor the architects, nor the builders spotted that anything was amiss. They did have to restore some of the old features in 2013 after a barney with the council, but it's not exactly the Victorian boozer it was. In 1950 the railway was officially closed, but the March of Progress was about to do what the Luftwaffe had failed to do, and destroy the docks. With the rise of commercial air travel, ocean liners became a quaint relic. The arrival of containerization resulted in ships so big that even the mighty Royal Albert couldn't handle them, and so they went downriver to Tilbury to be unloaded. From the 60s through to the 80s, the London docks closed, one by one. So the question was what to do with all this land, which was empty, and what to do with all these people who had been left behind. In 1976, the London Docklands Strategic Plan was published. This was full of big ideas about redevelopment, but nothing really practical. It required local authorities, local communities, outside investment, private landowners, the Greater London Council, and the government to all work together, which was something they weren't very interested in doing. So in 1981, the London Docklands Development Corporation was formed. This is often characterized as this all-powerful quango with the ability to rule over the Docklands like a god, but in practice it was more of a facilitator. It was formed under the Thatcher government of 1979, who were all in favour of that small government sort of thing. Nevertheless, the LDDC were able to push for some things, and rebuilding Cyprus was one of them. The remains of the old industries which had left with the docks were swept away, and the very same year that the LDDC was formed, 100 years after the ribbon was cut on the original Cyprus, a new Cyprus arose from the rubble. The new Cyprus was a great success. The houses were snapped up, residents reacted favourably, and soon the community was being treated as a model for other developments in the Docklands. Cyprus had everything it needed, but it didn't have a rail connection. The old railway had been pulled up in the 70s. But that was okay, because plans were afoot. As part of the development plan for the Docklands, a new light rail system was to be constructed. This was the Docklands Light Railway, a modern but low-budget solution to the question of rail transport. This opened in 1987, only running between Tower Gateway, Island Gardens and Stratford. But even as these lines were being opened, extensions were being devised. One of these was a line to Beckton. The line was technically an entirely new route, but for a significant portion of the way, including the bit through Cyprus, it followed an alignment very close to that of the old Galleons branch. The early stations of the DLR had a number of compromises due to the speed of construction, the budget, and the need to use existing track beds. The Beckton extension was, to all intents and purposes, a clean sheet. For the first time, the DLR could build the kind of line with the kind of station that they'd always wanted. The new line opened in 1994. For this section of its route, it runs along the central reservation of the Royal Albert Way, a new road that was opened in 1990, and so could make provision for, having a railway down the middle. Cyprus is constructed in the middle of a roundabout. Now, if you saw my video on Beckton Park Station, you may notice that the two stations are quite similar. As a matter of fact, they're basically identical. Despite being in the middle of a roundabout, there's easy access to the station from both sides, including step-free. The round shape is designed both to make the station feel roomy and light, but also safe. There isn't much by way of places where ne'er-do-wells and scofflaws might lurk. This layout is known as a bowl station, for reasons that I'm sure are fairly obvious. Outside the station there are bike racks and a good bus service for onward connection. The train service is frequent and runs directly to Tower Gateway, on the edge of the City of London. In 2000, Cyprus gained a new purpose with the opening of the University of East London. This is literally right next to the station on a formerly brownfield site. Despite the high hopes of various individuals and organisations, though, development has been slow to come to the Royal Albert Dock. But even so, what development there is well designed and it's very well served by public transport. And I don't think you can say fairer than that. Well, I do hope you enjoyed today's video. If so, please do leave a like and consider subscribing for more if you're not already a subscriber. I'd like, as always, to thank my generous donors on Ko-fi, on Patreon, and here on YouTube for your support. You are the bowl to my station. And I'll see you all again very soon. Cheerio.